welcome to Emma Jacobs, who is the author of a book called The Littler Museums of Paris. And Emma, first of all, I'd like to know what made you want to write this book and draw this book, illustrate this book in the first place?
So this started as a hobby before it was a book project. I just started going on the weekends when I lived here. It was just I would pick a museum. It would get me out to a new place in a new neighborhood. And sort of gradually got the idea of, maybe this would be a little chapbook that I would make for myself and for friends. And, over time, it became clear how much work it was going to be. And maybe I should formalize it as a project.
Okay. Did you have a target audience in mind when you realized it was going to become a bit more of a solid project? Did you have a target audience in mind, someone you were writing for?
I mean, yes. Do I know if that represents the actual audience? I'm not absolutely positive, but kind of the people who are looking to personalize their trip a little more, people who might be, I would love if people use it on their first visit, but maybe a second visit, they're trying to figure out what they haven't seen, what else is there, where locals go. And also people who just like things that are a little offbeat. Like there's a site, Atlas Obscura, and kind of their target audience.
Now, the illustrations, first of all, I want to know what kind of medium you're using, because they're very quaint. They remind me of the sort of journal that an artist might have made when they went traveling, and it was before the advent of photography. So they drew things or sketched things instead of having a photo. So what sort of...
they're in watercolor.
Watercolor.
And when I'm talking to French folks, I think like carnet de voyage, like travel journal, is sort of a recognizable genre here in France. I don't know if it's as common elsewhere, like in the English-speaking world, but the idea that it is sort of a travel journal of some text and some observations, but also, illustrations to go with them.
That's exactly what I felt when I looked at it. I felt it was sort of a keepsake object as well, a nice object to have with images that are not just photos, random photos. They're really illustrations that you've chosen to draw from your inspiration from the museums.
I think they're a little more personal, and also the hope is that they get people to slow down and take the pace of the book in a slightly different way than you skim with a regular guidebook. And also you want to give people more than just the information, because that is, theoretically something you can get on the internet. And this departs from a typical guidebook in a lot of ways, partly because, to justify people picking this up, you want to give them something different.
Exactly. No, it feels like a different kind of object to your usual guidebook. What's your connection to Paris and France personally? You mentioned living here before, but you're not here now. You're based in Canada.
I'm based in Montreal now. So I was living here on the visa vacances travail, the working holiday visa for Canadians, and have spent different amounts of time here over the years on other as a student, and just find the city really interesting. Sort of approach it from a history lens.
Did you study history and art? Because you're obviously an artist. It's a part of your hobby, but
I didn't do any formal training. I have this degree that I picked up called a Francophone Studies degree, which is more of a wider Francophone world than necessarily France. Sort of post-colonial studies.
Okay. So your interest in France and French culture goes beyond just the country France. It's that there's a Francophone culture, in fact, involved here.
It's a good fit for Montreal.
Yeah, definitely. An international city, but with the French and English divide perfectly balanced there. Now, how long did it take you to compile all the information for the book? Was it hard to make a choice of what you found to put into your book?
I think that for the city museums, it was fairly straightforward. There's a little tiny chapter at the back with suburban museums, and narrowing that down. I memean, that's a whole nother, probably 100 plus.
Another book.
Choosing that was more difficult. I felt more like, I had to pick the ones that spoke to me and that were sort of geographically spread out. So yes, that part was particularly tricky. The others, I felt like it became sort of clear whether I had something to say about them or not, and whether they fit or not. And it's hard for me to say how long this took because, again, it started as a hobby. I wasn't really counting hours per se. Once I had the proposal chapters and the project was accepted, I spent about 6 months on it full time. And finish that up, and then there's a whole process of editing and back and forth.
Yes, so it becomes quite a big project. You've got all the different layers of bookmaking to go through. Yeah. Now, what about in each chapter? I noticed at the beginning you've got a little symbol with earphones. Did you incorporate some audio content into? Oh,
that's actually to indicate what information is available in English. So if there's text or if there's audio tours available, whatever there is, it's going to make it easier for English speakers to go through the museum. That's all indicated.
Okay. So the book itself is in English. Is there a French version in the works?
Not yet. I really hope so. If any French publishers are interested in taking that on, I'd love that.
Because perhaps for Parisians or French people travelling in their own country, this would be a fantastic way to rediscover Paris, or perhaps even for the first time, those who don't know the city very well, and to learn about their own city in French.
Yeah, and I think Parisians like that. I think they're always curious about corners of the city that they don't know.
Yeah. Now, do you have yourself a favourite littler museum?
I really love the Museum of Hunting and Nature because it's so unique and quirky and feels very Paris. I think the other one that I send people to if they can only choose one, because I think it's got the sort of period, it's the completely walking into a time capsule of the 18th century, is the Musée du Commando, which is on the Parc Monceau. And that one is also just a special little capsule museum that only takes a little bit. And if you only have a little time in Paris, that's where I might start.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, there's some names of museums I admit that I've never heard of. So I'm interested now to discover all these little places. What was the most surprising thing for you, or things that came out of your research process? Did you stumble across something else that you went, wow, I really didn't know about that?
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, this is not a thing in particular, but one of the pieces of this that I really enjoyed is characters would turn back up. You'd be working on one section and find, read about some founder's social circle, and then those people would turn up again somewhere else. You really, in researching it, because there's so many museums and they cover so many. They're developed over such a long period of time and cover so many areas. People pop up and you feel like you're getting a sort of holistic picture of the city.
That's kind of a big family of museums.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming to RFI to talk about your book. Any desire to go on to another book project? Have you got another idea?
I'm not sure yet, but I learned so much doing this. I would love to be able to apply that again. I have to find a subject that I feel as moved by as this one.
Yes, this is obviously a personal, there's a personal connection there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Emma Jacobs, the author of The Littler Museums of Paris, thank you very much for coming to Paris Live.
Thank you very much for having me.